Okay, so the next bill I'm going to do is the bill to change the rules on patent infringement lawsuits. Sorry, one of my roommates is losing in Texas Hold'em. So the bill says that all plaintiffs in patent infringement lawsuits are required to agree to provide more information on their lawsuit, including their use of patent innovation, and to pay the legal fees for the defense in the case of a loss. This is major. This is major. It's major. Major. The increased information on the lawsuits, we outlined the violation for by the patent, and this whole bill is basically trying to prevent patent trolling. Examples of awesome patent trolling: Apple recently lost to this middle school dropout a $532.9 million lawsuit, and because like the Apple lawyers are known to be dicks when they go into like patent litigation, and it's just like we're Apple, fuck you, we're gonna win. Except they lost massively. Normally, Apple tends to win their patent litigation cases, but not in this case. Anyways, patent trolling though is a really big issue, and that's why I'm gonna post this article from Tech Dirt talking about how Apple and Google they're really like it's becoming like pretty much a big issue. But then again, you can make the argument of who gives a shit, right? Like if big, powerful, billion dollar worth companies lose money to like little guys, right? Well, the whole argument is that it ultimately undermines innovation, right? Because it's not just against big companies; it's also against smaller ones. And in Silicon Valley, like this whole patent issue is kind of becoming a big deal because the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot patent math, and all software is based on math. So what you can't patent is stupid stuff like scrolling, the scrolling system, or swiping, and that's why. And ironically, patent trolling is also used by larger companies like Microsoft, being super famous for it, to actually shut down like startups. They're like causing them problems because they just say you're violating our patent stuff. So here's what I'm going to link you to. I'm going to link you to this interesting link under U.S. patent law in Wikipedia. And look at this section called Utilization and Importance, and he talks about are patents like really necessary for innovation, because that's why, for example, in the software community we have the open source movement that tries to make all software accessible, right? And here's like it's beautiful. It's a list of all the Supreme Court cases dealing with patent law, because a lot of issues have already come up about what's patentable and what's not patentable. More importantly, the issue of like forcing the defense to pay legal fees. You can file malicious, frivolous lawsuits charges or a malicious prosecution of patent law charge, do the same thing. So the bill might kind of be redundant, right? So yes, so I'm going to link you to those. More importantly, however, right, the problem is the thing that you should research. I haven't had the time. Is patent trolling affected like disproportionately larger companies or disproportionately smaller companies? Because that gives you different affirmatives and different negatives, right? So so you can make an app speech talking about how patent trolling affects the small businesses, and how it's bad because it's from larger companies to smaller companies, right? So like you can give the example of Microsoft, how in the 90s and stuff they used to like be called the sharks because it just kept eating up all the startups. Because it's a lot often used as a tool for blackmail. Like either we'll sue you for patent infringement, or you sell us your technology for a bunch of millions of dollars. Still though, remember what they said in The Social Network: $1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? $1 billion. And that's really the mentality of Silicon Valley. And patent trolling is becoming a big issue in the tech community because it's easier to do in the tech community. Because once the author dies or something, like a company can purchase patents from, and I become like a patent holding company. People do that. They spend their free time doing that. So on one hand, you can give an affirmative about how we should stop big companies from abusing patent law against small startups to stop innovation. But then you can make the argument that patent trolls affect small businesses, right? And then you can make an aff about how we should allow big companies do not like it's just undermine the law in the first place if we allow for patent trolling, because it's a tool to just extort money out of larger companies that at some point will come down on the consumer, because if Apple has to pay like $500 million in a settlement, they're not going to have as much money to invest in R&D or as much money to pay off dividends. Okay, this is not probably true in the case of Apple, of course, because they have they're $1 trillion company basically. Um, so that's like the affirmative side, right? On the negative side, you want to argue two things. The one thing I would focus on a lot is to pay the legal fees of the defense in the case of a loss. Well, what defines a loss, right? What if the case gets dismissed on procedural grounds? And you really, like, it's really unfair. You could actually make a solid, like, equal protection argument, right? And that's equal protection. That's from the 14th Amendment. Saying that why are like that's not required in healthcare cases, and that's like very similar and stuff, right? It's not required in any other kind of law, in any kind of like law setting. And the reason why this is problematic is because you're basically putting the burden on the plaintiff that's alleging the abuse. That's kind of dumb, right? Because think if you're a small business owner, are you gonna go up against Microsoft if Microsoft says, "Oh, you know what? We're like once you think about it in terms of risk, if you get the loss, you're gonna have to pay us millions and millions of dollars in lawyer fees." Um, so the kind of like it's kind of like you could make an argument that this legislation is not necessarily unconstitutional, but so like you would just make the argument like kind of like the 14th Amendment that this is creating an unfair burden on plaintiffs in patent cases for no reason. There's no really like arbitrary reason. It's a kind of like an arbitrary reason, and you should just let dispute to work out. Um, and then the other thing is about like requiring to provide more information. Well, that's kind of like work product, right? Like, what if I'm developing like this new crazy way of mining Bitcoin, and somebody steals something from me, or like they're like purposely like like one of my employees is fired and he's mad and he goes to the company, right? Like if you have to provide the information about this lawsuit, you're undermining work product. So you put like the companies in a double bind where either you reveal the information about how to use the product so then everybody can just copy it in China, right? Or reverse engineer it in some way. Or you just cannot take the risk of paying the legal fees in the case of you losing. I mean, that could encourage settlement, which is good because it prevents frivolous lawsuits. And this could include open source innovation. I would definitely say patent trolls don't give a fuck because it's not a person most of the times. It's a patent troll. It's an LLC. So what would happen is Apple sues the patent troll sues Apple. They take it to court. The patent troll loses. They have to pay $500 million in legal, well, not probably $500 million, but $200 million in legal fees, and the patent troll just declares bankruptcy because they're a limited liability company. So really, like, this is going to disproportionately affect the actual people that are trying to sue Apple or Microsoft or a larger company for for stealing their stuff, because the LLC can just file for bankruptcy and just not care. And in terms of information, this is like undermining the very basis of like kind of like having a stealth project and of patenting, right? So yeah, there are good arguments on both sides. I'm gonna put the links to like the impact, like how much patent is actually important. The list of all the Supreme Courts is related to it. Scroll through it and see if there's anything that seems to apply to it. There are a lot of like Wikipedia links that might be interesting. And then I'm going to link you to the articles about how this affects big companies, how the recent one, how they lost the middle school dropout, and yeah, remember equal protection.